When looking at the crimes of the Nazis, one is first struck by the scale of the crimes committed and the unspeakable horrors. There is plenty to point out as disturbing, but certain aspects of Nazism and its leading members were undoubtably weird. In today's video, we will look at the wider aspects of the ideology and how such weirdness would influence the horrific crimes that they are rightly remembered for. The image we have of the Nazis is one of militaristic paramilitaries and leather trenchcoat-wearing officers conducting genocides with cold indifference. But in the mid-20s, Hitler had not yet taken power and had just failed his bid to take over Germany by force in the beer hall putsch. After this failure, Hitler attempted to rebuild and rebrand the Nazi Party. Part of this would be to cultivate his public persona. At this time, Hitler chose to focus on his connection to German and in particular, Bavarian culture and tradition. He organised a photo shoot in spring of 1927, during which he wore and posed in lederhosen, traditional Bavarian leather shorts. The goal was to present Hitler as a man of the people, embodying wholesome German folk values in an attempt to shake off his image as a violent failed revolutionary. Hitler did actually enjoy wearing lederhosen in the 1920s, but the photograph, when looking back with the knowledge of the crimes and the horrors of the Nazis, strike a weird or even comical response. Unsurprisingly, when Hitler saw the photos, he was disappointed. This was not the image he sought to present. The lederhosen photos made him appear ridiculous and undermined the aura of authority that he wanted to project. So instead, Hitler moved to presenting himself to be seen as a messianic leader, not a traditional Bavarian man, and so he had these photographs suppressed. Joseph Goebbels and his propaganda ministry would go on to be meticulous about controlling Hitler's image. Instead, Hitler's public image would become the military uniform, the carefully staged rallies at Nuremberg, and the intense, almost mystical poses captured by specially selected photographers. The negatives from the shoot were kept by Hitler's photographer and never destroyed. The lederhosen photographs only surfaced after the Second World War. These weird photographs shine a light on the man who would become the Führer and plunge the world into chaos, revealing a point in time when he was experimenting with his public identity. It's a grim reminder of how extremists and populists can cultivate their image, creating in this instance the artificial Nazi cult of personality. Another weird aspect of Nazism was the use of quack doctors and strange beliefs surrounding health. Hitler pushed the notion of clean living, being a non-smoking teetotal vegetarian. But Hitler was also noted as a hypochondriac, fearful of germs and illness, which could be a result of his mother's death to cancer. So he enlisted the services of a quack doctor by the name of Theodor Morell to ensure his vitality. One of Hitler's notable problems was his stomach, suffering from bloating, cramps, and terrible gas. It is thought that Hitler may have had Crohn's disease or IBS, possibly aggravated by being lactose intolerant yet consuming a high dairy vegetarian diet. Morell managed to successfully treat Hitler for stomach pain, giving him a mix of probiotics and vitamins. Gaining Hitler's favour, Morell became part of the Nazi inner circle and became a successful businessman. He would sell his bizarre concoctions to the Nazi elite and leveraged his position to gain favourable deals with pharmaceutical companies. Dr. Morell would provide Hitler and leading Nazis with cocktails of drugs and stimulants. Amongst the litany of drugs Hitler took were cocaine and adrenaline eye drops, bovine testosterone, and amphetamines. This chemical dependency is at odds with the clean-living teetotal image Hitler sought to present to the world. Another strange part of Nazism was its obsession with the occult and mystical traditions. While Hitler himself was skeptical of such things, several key figures within the Nazi leadership were deeply obsessed with esoteric ideas. These beliefs were even woven into the fabric of Nazi ideology, creating a strange blend of pseudoscience, mythology, and occult symbolism. The most prominent figure in this regard was Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS. Himmler envisioned the SS not merely as a paramilitary force. The SS was the most powerful body in the Nazi state, responsible for running the death camps and enforcing Nazi racial standards. But Himmler wanted the SS to be more than this. He saw his men as a spiritual knightly order tasked with protecting the Aryan bloodline. Himmler would draw inspiration from the medieval stories like the Knights Templar and would adopt German pagan traditions. He sought to construct a new quasi-religious mythology for the Third Reich. Under his direction, Wewelsburg Castle became a spiritual ceremonial centre for the SS. Meetings of the SS leadership would be held in this castle, and in its grounds a concentration camp was established. Himmler was also heavily influenced by Ariosophy, a mystical movement that combined nationalism, racism, eugenics, and esoteric ideas. They believed that the Aryan race descended from a lost ancient civilization, sometimes linked to myths of Atlantis. This obsession with ancient origins drove the Nazi regime to sponsor bizarre expeditions, setting up the Arenberg, a pseudo-scientific research institute set up to uncover this supposed lineage. These missions included attempts to locate the Holy Grail, produce evidence of lost Aryan civilizations in Tibet, and even mythical objects such as Thor's hammer. While these expeditions might seem weird today, or read like a plot from an Indiana Jones film, they reflect the Nazis' desire to legitimize their ideology through myth and mysticism. But more than this, the Nazis sought to prove that the German Aryans had ancestral claims to Eastern Europe. This in turn would justify their Lebensraum expansion, and the genocide of Slavs and Jews in Eastern Europe and Russia. The Lebensraum policy was a key part of Nazi ideology, and would see the people of Eastern Europe and Russia subject to genocide to make room for German settlers, under the justification that they were reclaiming what was rightfully theirs. Occult ideas even played a role in the Nazis' obsession with eugenics and racial purity. They believed they were locked in a struggle for the survival of the Aryan race, framing their genocidal policies as part of an occult struggle between forces of light and darkness. The Nazis also appropriated symbols with deep cultural, occult, or mystical roots. The swastika, for example, is an ancient, thousands of years old symbol found in many cultures, where it often represented prosperity, cosmic harmony, and spiritual power. The swastika is one of humanity's earliest symbols, appearing in prehistoric cave engravings in Iran to ancient Greek motifs. It has been used by people all around the world, notably used in the Hindu religion. This appropriation and corruption of the swastika into a representation of Aryan supremacy and racial struggle has tarnished the symbol. For many people, the swastika is now solely a symbol of hate. In the end, the Nazi fascination with the occult was more than deluded beliefs in an imagined ancestry. By merging the occult and mysticism with their ideology, the Nazis constructed a world that portrayed their empire as part of a grand cosmic destiny, making their crimes seem not only justified, but divinely ordained and necessary. Another weird aspect of Nazism was the inherent contradictions. They pushed the narrative that the Aryan race were the strongest, purest race, designed to rule over all other inferior people. But they also sought to paint themselves as victims to a worldwide Jewish and communist conspiracy that had betrayed Germany in the First World War and caused their defeat. The Nazis also pushed the idea that Jews too were to blame for the harsh terms of the Treaty of Versailles that crippled the country in the years after the war. All of this was framed as a conspiracy to weaken the German people. This would be the foundation for the violence and genocide to come. Jews and communists were interwoven, no distinction made between the two, coining the term Judeo-Bolshevism. Hitler clung to the victimhood narrative to the bitter end. As the Allied and Red Armies closed in, he ranted how his generals, his soldiers, and even the German people had failed him. He believed that the destruction of the Reich would inspire others to continue his work. The Nazis' victim mentality was one of the most dangerous and weirdest parts of their ideology. By casting themselves as both the supreme rulers and the persecuted victims, they created a worldview where any act of violence, no matter how monstrous, could be justified as self-defense. This mix didn't just fuel war or genocide, it would inspire millions of people into becoming willing participants in a fantasy of revenge and redemption. And finally, we shall end on a rather strange one. Many leading Nazis, including Hitler and Himmler, believed in what was termed the Welteisleihe, or in English, the world ice theory. This theory was put forward by an Austrian engineer by the name of Hans Hoheberger. He suggested that ice was the fundamental substance of the universe. It spoke of Ice Age cataclysms that led to the development of superior races like the Atlanteans or the Aryans. It proclaimed to predict heavenly phenomena, and that much of the world's history had been shaped by the destruction or presence of ice moons. You might be surprised to hear that this came to Hans in a dream. His ideas were widely rejected by academics, so he switched to pushing this belief to the general population. Being far simpler to understand, it soon gained traction. Notable believers in this theory were Hitler, Himmler, and other leading Nazis. It was pushed as an Aryan theory, counter to what was considered the Jewish sciences of the likes of Einstein. The theory sought to explain the esoteric, from the Great Flood in the Bible to how Atlantis had been destroyed by a previous ice moon. Whenever faced with scientific evidence of the true nature of the universe, Hans would insist that the science was flawed, that calculations were misleading, or that evidence was just fake. Nothing could shake the proponents of the world ice theory. For the Nazis, this theory was part of unifying all fields of research into matching the Nazi worldview. The world ice theory was the only border science that Hitler embraced wholly and with conviction, even believing that it could one day replace Christianity in how people saw the formation of the universe. It's an example of how Nazi hatred of Jewish science led to them ignoring the reality of the universe in favour of a more comforting story that fit their narrative.